The best way to learn vocabulary in Spanish is in context. That means through reading, maybe stories, storytelling, maybe use story asking techniques in your classes. But like I shared before on my channel, maybe that's not an option for you. Maybe your district requires you to use common assessments that include vocabulary quizzes at very specific points in a unit or chapter, and that makes you feel like you have to do vocabulary practice activities because of this set timeline. So if that's you, if that's your situation, I wanted to share some vocabulary activities to help your students master those words in time for the common assessment that they have to take. Hey, my name is Ashley, aka Senior to Spanish, where I provide easy-to-use resources to save you time and energy while you're lesson planning. If you're new here, I just want to make sure that you know that links to everything that I mentioned will be down in the description box below this video. Quick note for you, every time I do an activity roundup like this, I'm trying to share as many ideas as quickly as possible so it's not super overwhelming. But if you want details or more information, there'll be a blog post for you with examples, things you can download, freebies, that sort of stuff down below. Okay, let's get into it. Vocabulary activity number 1 are matamoscas, or the fly swatter game. And the way this one works is you're going to hang up words or phrases or pictures on the wall or on the whiteboard, and you're going to kind of spread them out. Then you're going to have 2, maybe 3 students, each with a fly swatter, and as you call out words or phrases, they're going to race to be the first to swat it, to splat it. And then they get points depending on who's there first. Next up is partner matamoscas, and I much prefer this to the whole class game because I feel like more students are engaged, more students are involved. What you're going to do is you're going to make a game board with words, phrases, or pictures, and they're going to play in pairs or small groups. The rest of it is the same. You're calling out words or phrases, they're listening, and they're racing to be the first to tap, slap, or hit the picture that corresponds to the vocabulary word. Oldie but a goodie, bingo. Use words, use pictures, use phrases, whatever you want to do, it's super easy. I like to make students make the cards themselves because that way you don't have to find a random bingo generator and they're getting that extra practice as they're illustrating or writing in the words. Taboo, heads up, or catchphrase they're all basically the same game. You give them a word or a vocabulary phrase and they have to describe it in the target language without saying the word or vocabulary phrase. It's difficult, but it's really, really good practice for circumlocution. If you're doing this with lower levels, they might not be ready for that level of output. So I do have a blog post where I've explained how you can scaffold this activity using Quizlet, and I'll make sure to link that in the description box for you. Pictionary is another oldie but goodie. They draw a vocabulary word, they draw, and then they draw or illustrate the vocabulary words. If you have mini whiteboards, it is perfect for this, but scratch paper is fine, and you can even do it as a whole class activity where you give a couple of students space on the whiteboard, depending on how much whiteboard space you have, and they're all playing and guessing together. Guess Who is super, super fun. This is an old like Hasbro game where they can flip up and flip down, but you can make your game boards with anything, and I mean pretty much anything. I have a free download with a Guess Who game board for winter-themed clothing and color vocabulary that you can grab down in the description box below. But you could do this with food, you could do this with activities, literally anything goes. I always, with my Spanish 1s, give them a sheet to kind of support them with the language in case they don't know how to say things like is wearing, or that kind of thing, to help them kind of structure their questions and make sure they're understanding each other, because Guess Who is really, really hard if they don't know how to ask questions, or if their partner is asking them questions and they don't understand, they're getting lost in translation. So giving them some sort of scaffolded question asking sheet really helps this game go smoothly. Next up is memory, and again, you can do this with words, you can do this with pictures, and you can do this with chunks of language. Either way works. Old school game again. Oh man, there's a ton of these. And you're gonna just cut up cards and they're gonna flip them over and match. Absolutely wild experience to me in the last few years. I've had to teach students how to play memory. When I was growing up, this was something we just played, like a family game. We played around the table, but I've found that many students haven't ever played it before. So heads up, don't just give them the cards and say, okay, play memory, because they maybe don't know how to play. So I have always played the way where they're all face down, you flip over 2 at a time. If they don't match, you flip them back. If you flip them over and they do match, you take them, you keep them, and then you get to go again. That's how I play. Maybe you play it a little bit differently. We always play that the winner is the person who has the most pairs. Next up is Mi Lapis, and I've actually shared this before as a reading activity, but it works great for vocabulary too if you wanted to use it that way. You're going to give students a sheet of paper, maybe even with just a list of vocabulary words. I really like pictures for this, and you're just going to give them in pairs or in small groups one pencil, and one die. They're going to take turns with that pencil in the middle of the group, rolling to see if they get a 6, right? So partner 1's going to roll, partner 2 is going to roll, partner 3 is going to roll, and they're going to keep passing it around. The first person to get a 6 is going to grab the pencil and start writing. The other people are going to keep rolling until they get a 6, and then they can steal the pencil away from their partner. The point of the game is to be the first person to complete the sheet correctly. They're racing. It's super fun, kind of loud because the dice are rolling, but good. Next up is 2 truths and a lie, and the way this game works for vocabulary is you can have them write sentences or say sentences specific to the unit. So you could say, you know, come up with 2 truths and a lie about things that you like to do, or come up with 2 truths and a lie about foods that you like or dislike. Anything like that, you can theme it to the unit that you're in. When I do this with my lower levels, I like to have them write it first. I've found that when they have to come up with the 2 truths and a lie on the spot in the target language, the affective filter goes, whoop, and they go, I don't know what to say. So tell them the theme, tell them the expectations, have them write their sentences. And I do actually like to play this as a whole class game. You can do it in small groups, but I actually think it's a lot of fun to play as a whole class. So what I'll do is I'll have them write their sentences, and they need to label truth, truth, lie, write their name on it, and then they pass them into me. And then we play as a whole group. My students are seated. I usually seat students in small groups. So I'll pull a slip and I'll say, okay, these are Bob's sentences, and I'll read sentence, sentence, sentence. And then I'll give them some time to confer with their group, and they're going to try and figure out which one is Bob's lie. Then the groups are going to hold up their number and say, okay, sentence 1, sentence 2, or sentence 3. All the guesses are in. Bob, what's the lie? Oh, it's number 3. Oh, I had no idea. So after the big reveal, I just tally points. And, group 1 has a point because they guessed correctly, and so on. The group of the person whose sentences it is are not allowed to guess. Hopefully that makes sense. So if your sentences are being read, your group is eliminated from that round. They can't guess. That's fine. And it moves very quickly, and it's really a fun kind of icebreaker, classroom relationship builder while you're still practicing those vocabulary words in context because they're writing their sentences. Up next is Corre and Círculos, which I have shared about a ton on my channel before. The way that it works is that on the bottom half of a sheet of paper, you're going to put a vocabulary word, a phrase, a picture. It could be a couple pictures together illustrating something. It could be even a riddle. It's very important that they can tell exactly what that word is, and there's only one answer. No multiple possibilities, right? So if you're doing like a body parts, corre and círculos, it needs to be clear, hand versus finger, that kind of thing. Because if they have multiple answers that could be correct, it's going to throw off the scavenger hunt. If you want to learn more about how to play that scavenger hunt style game, I have a ton of videos for you on my channel. I'll make sure to link them for you here so that you can check that out. It is one of my favorites. Speaking of favorites, maze games are also one of my favorites. Maze games are exactly what they sound like. It's a sheet of paper that's set up like a maze. This is not a vocabulary one. This is for AR verbs, but this way you can at least see kind of what I'm talking about with the layout. So what they're going to do is you can either put in pictures, you can put in words, you could do fill in the blanks, any of that kind of thing, and they're going to read it, and then they're going to pick the right way through the path to get to the end. I actually love pairing Corre and Círculos with the maze game because Corre, they're all going to finish at different times, so it's nice to have a fast finisher. So usually what I'll do is they'll play, and then they'll pick up a maze that's related to what we're doing, and they'll just work on this independently or, sometimes in partners until everybody is done. Next up is Pop, and I learned this one from Not So Wimpy teacher, who is not a language teacher. Well, she's not a world language teacher anyways. It's a fun game. She puts them in little cute popcorn containers. I'm not so cute. The way that it works is they pull out a card and they either define it or use it in a sentence or clarify what it is, or if it's a picture, right, they say the word in Spanish. If they draw a card that says Pop, they lose all their cards. The point of the game is to be the one to have the most cards at the time. It's not for points, it's just until the time ends. Next up are blank game boards, and these are super low prep and super easy to use. You could use them with task cards if you wanted to, if you already have task cards that go with this unit, or you could just print the blank game board and write in vocabulary words, either in Spanish or in English, and then as they're playing, they roll, they move, whatever space they land on, they have to define or translate or, whatever it is, depending on what you wrote in there. You could also print pictures and put them inside. totally up to you. I think writing is a little bit easier in this space. I have a set of free blank game boards that I'll link for you down in the description box below. So this is one of them, but there's a few other formats because it's kind of nice to change things up and give students a choice, right? So maybe you give them this one or they could pick the other one. Whatever. Next up are charades and reverse charades, and you probably know how to play charades, so I'm just going to explain reverse charades. This time, instead of having one person standing and acting out for everybody, which I have found sometimes students get nervous or a little bit uncomfortable with that, reverse charades, the way that it works is instead of one person acting it out, you have a group of people acting it out. And usually what I would like to do, right, I've mentioned before, I often have my students seated in groups, is I'll have half of the group go out in the hallway, half of the group will stay. I'll pop my head out in the hallway and I'll say, hey, you're going to do this word. You have 30 seconds to, confer with your teammate. And then they come in, they go right to their groups and they stand right in front of them. And then they act it out when I say go, right? They can't act it out until I say go, because otherwise I have students who are walking in the room and they're acting or they're doing an action and their group that's across the room is hollering out whatever it is. And the other ones aren't even inside the room yet. So wait until they're at their groups. You say go or action or whatever word you want to use. And then whichever group calls it out first correctly, I always say correctly in Spanish, gets the point for their group. Next up is telephone, which again, there's lots of old school games that work really well for vocabulary. If you're not familiar with telephone, students are seated in a row or in a circle. They're going to say a word or phrase and they're going to pass it down. They're whispering so they can't hear everybody else, and they have to listen for pronunciation and then say it to the next person in line. Next up is strip bingo. This is an idea from the Comprehensible Classroom. It's very similar to bingo, but it's a little bit smaller, it's a little bit faster, and I like it a lot. So with strip bingo, instead of playing with an entire vocabulary card, they get a strip of paper and they make 5 boxes out of it. And then you're going to, again, call or, say sentences. Maybe you're reading a whole story. And if they hear a word that they wrote in their boxes, they get to rip it off if it's at the end of the sheet. If it's in the middle, they're stuck. They have to wait till it comes around again. So they're working on ripping it off. And when they get to that one last box that was in the middle, they have to rip it in half and then they're the winner. You can play this a whole bunch of times. They really enjoy ripping it. You do have to make sure that they pick up the floor at the end of the day. Okay, next one is Telestrations or telephone Pictionary. This is actually one I learned my very first day of college. We did it as an icebreaker game with our, orientation group. It's really fun. You start with a short sentence in the target language and they're gonna read it, and that first person is gonna illustrate that sentence in the space provided. Then they're going to fold back the top of the paper so you can't see the sentence, they can only see the picture. Then they're going to pass their sheet of paper to the next person in the line. They'll get a paper from the person next to them and they'll only be able to see the picture. They'll look at that picture and they're going to write a word or phrase in Spanish that they think that picture was supposed to be illustrating. Then they'll fold the picture back so all they can see is the word or sentence that they just wrote, and they'll pass it to the next person. Repeat. So you keep repeating with that. Illustrate, fold, pass, look at the picture, write, fold, pass, look at the next sentence, illustrate, fold, pass. You keep that going until they're at the end of the paper, which, isn't actually that many passes. It's usually like between 8 and 10, depending on how you set up the grid. And then they're going to unfold them all and they're going to look at what happened. Just like with telephone, with the normal words that you're just whispering to each other, it usually becomes kind of convoluted, especially because it's timed. So it's not like they have 20 minutes to make this beautiful illustration. They have like 30 seconds to draw a picture as quickly and clearly as they can. And some of them use that time to process what the word or phrase is, and then they go, I only have time for like 3 stick figures. So it's funny. They really enjoy it. I like to start off the sheets of paper with a sentence that I've written on the top so I know, hey, we're practicing this set of vocabulary. Almost the last one, not quite. You can do levantense si or swap places if, totally up to you, and depends kind of on the classroom space you have. But you're going to say a sentence like, swap places if you're wearing blue today. And then they have to stand up and they swap places with somebody else who is wearing blue. If you don't have the space in your classroom for everybody to be swapping places quickly, you might just say stand up if. And obviously you can change this one or theme this one to your vocabulary. It doesn't have to be colors or clothing. It can be swap places if you played basketball yesterday, or swap places if you like to play basketball, or stand up if you like hamburgers, stand up if you like whatever, right? You can change the sentences based on your unit, which is really nice. Pop up, and this is from Senora Chase. If you are not familiar with Senora Chase's blog, Get your butt over there and read it. It is chock full of goodness. So many ideas, and this is just one. So the way this one works is you are gonna have, a list of vocabulary that you're working with. You're gonna take your whole class and you're gonna divide it in two. So you have this half of the room and you have this half of the room, and you're going to number all the students. So if you have 15 kids on this side, you have 1 through 15. If you have 15 kids on this side, you have 1 through 15. So you'll have 1 over here and 1 over there. 2, 2, 3, 3. You get it. She says that it works best if you try and pair ability levels. You'll be a little sneaky about it, but that way it's not a super high student trouncing a super low student, or you know what I mean, like that kind of thing. It's just no fun to play. You've split your class into 2 teams. You've numbered everybody. Now what you're going to do is you are going to say a word or a phrase or a sentence in Spanish, and you're going to say it a couple of times and give them time to think. And then you're going to say a number. One of the numbers that your students have been numbered. The students who are assigned that number stand up quickly and translate the sentence. Pop up is the name of the game, right? So they're popping up when their number is called. They want to be the first one to translate the sentence correctly and earn the point for the team. You're just going to keep playing this game, calling out different numbers, using different sentences, and keeping track of points. Again, she has a full detailed explanation on her blog, which I will make sure to link to down in the description box below. Last vocabulary activity, and this one's lots of fun. I love playing it in English and Spanish. Either way works. Categories is the name of the game. So what you're going to do is you're going to roll a die, or you can just use like a random generator, and you're going to give them a letter. Students have to come up with vocabulary words that are related to that topic that starts with that letter. It is a little bit tricky sometimes, but that's okay. If you want to get really into the scoring for this one, the way that I've always played it is if somebody else thought of the same word as you, no point, right? So if we're playing animals, letter A, and I say aardvark, and so does that other person, neither of us get a point. You just keep playing. And you can do this in small groups. You can do this as the whole class. There's lots of different ways to do it. You could also, right, if you have students who are a little bit lower level, you could maybe reduce the letters. So instead of doing it with the whole alphabet, they only have so many letters to do. So that way it's not like, they're not quite ready for that vocabulary-wise. There's a few different scaffolding options you could do with it that way. Whew! That was a whole bunch of vocabulary activities, but I'm sure I missed some too. So I would love to hear in the comments down below what your favorite way is to practice vocabulary with your students. Comment below and let me know. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.